Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and KISMA. I'm Nick, and today we are continuing with our series of Working with the Law. We're getting close to the end here. We're diving into a little bit of a deep one called the Law of Sacrifice.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and KISMA, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set. Hey there, KISMA.
Well, hello there.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It was a beautiful day. We took a walk into the village in Carlsbad. Did you know that today's, I guess it's like a fair or market or something, is the country's largest one-day festival?
Largest one day. I was shocked.
I know, there were lots of people there.
Yeah, I was truly shocked at all the booths. I thought, because the village of Carlsbad has a weekly, what do they call it? Like a market.
It's like a fair market.
On the main street.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was packed, streets and streets. We had so much fun and we found the perfect things. We got some really great olive oil and balsamic.
Avocado oil.
So right? And then, of course, where do we end up with a guy from Nepal? Like you were like beeline as soon as you saw him. And we bought two beautiful what do they call it?
Hand hammered, with the 7 metal bowls.
Yeah, singing bowls. And it was so funny, you guys, because we're just like, oh yeah, these are great. And the llama something, he was so cute. He was like all effervescent. He's playing them and I'm like, what's that one? And he has a little tuning thing so I can find the pitches. And he's like, this is the third eye. I'm like, of course it is. It's the one I like. And he's like, but I had a yoga teacher who's been looking for the third eye for 3 years. And he's like, I don't know how it landed here. I'm like, because we're here. We want that one. And then we bought the heart one. And then we got home and we already have what was it? The solar, is the other one like a solar plexus?
No, it's the root.
The root, which is cool.
In that system.
Yeah. In that system.
More attuned to the basic.
Anyways, they're beautiful. And he kind of, it made me realize you just want to go to the source. He just knew how to gong it and then hold it right in front of our field. And immediately, I was just like, whoa, that was incredible. So I just had such an appreciation for him. Yeah.
He did a funny thing, I thought very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking, kind of looking back at the law of increase that we did last week. And when we asked, well, how much are they? They didn't have any price tags on them.
That's right.
He started to say, well, they're kind of expensive.
Yeah, it's they're really expensive. And then he even uttered, they're expensive for you too. And I was like, dude, you're talking to a prosperity person.
I don't think he meant it that way, but he did. He started, he had the kind of lack.
Yeah.
He did a good job of talking them up. He's like, they're from Nepal. They're hand hammered with the 7 metals and
gold
all this
in
stuff.
It.
But when it came to it, you could tell he was a little uncomfortable about the price. I was like, just tell me what they are because I'm buying them. I don't really care. Because we're definitely
$500 later and 2 more singing bowls.
They're so
great, so worth it. The value, right? For us, it was just the value, and he was such a beautiful human. So they came super clean.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Yeah, it was really wonderful.
It was really fun. So. The law of sacrifice. We sacrificed $500 to have a couple of amazing singing bowls. Totally worth it.
Totally worth it. Can't wait to play with them.
That's how I want to kick this off because I know this word sacrifice can have a connotation of, oh no, I shouldn't have to sacrifice. I shouldn't have to give something up. I shouldn't, it's the shoulds. And there is this part that we'll get to in the personal growth world that it can be misconstrued, but we're talking about one of the spiritual laws here. So it's different. The essence is, of course, if you want to have space to bring in something more, bring in something better, you're going to have to give something up.
Right.
And I remember this, being taught to us at the Vedanta Academy in a way around desires. Swamiji would always say, you cannot clear a desire. You can repress a desire. It's going to come back up. You have to fulfill your desires. The idea is you want to raise your desires. It's like walking up a ladder. And that's the same thing of the law of sacrifice. So if you're walking up a ladder, you want a higher desire, you want to bring something higher into your world, you have to take your foot off the lower rung and place it on the higher rung. That's sacrificing something for the higher.
Yeah. And this is something that we're already doing.
True.
We're trading our time and our effort and our energy always, right? We're expending some sort of time and effort and energy, no matter what we do in our life. And the question becomes, well, what is it that you are sacrificing that time and effort and energy for in your life? Right. And I think so. So whenever there's kind of a negative connotation around this, I understand that the word is charged. And I remember we did an episode that was about discipline, right? Is discipline a dirty word?
Yeah.
And it was actually, we drew a little bit from this chapter in a way, but we focused more on discipline. Well, now we're ready to dive full on into the sacrifice, everybody, because you're sacrificing literally a chunk of your life for whatever activity it is that you're choosing to do.
Yes.
So you're scrolling down Facebook mindlessly, you're numbing out, like whatever that thing is that you might be doing, you're sacrificing your life for that.
Yeah. You're giving time away.
Right.
You're giving energy away. Yeah, cool.
Right.
So when we talk about the laws, again, we're referencing from a book called Working with the Law by Raymond Holliwell. And we sussed out, I think the copyright was 1964. And in chapter 10, the law of sacrifice, he opens up by saying every man, because it's written back there, so every human should have an ideal or a hero. If there is one who has none and desires none, do not trust him too far. A man who has no ideals does not wish to be any greater than he is, and will in time prove a detriment to others. So ideal, I know from the basis of our teachings, ideal is something that is greater than you. It's the expression of good, of expansion. And so when you have that desire, everyone in your life, you can start to see, it's like, oh yeah, I have this ideal. Yes, I have to give time. I have to sacrifice time to attain it. Yes, I have to sacrifice energy to work towards it. There is a give, you're giving something to receive.
Always.
You can't miss. So the question becomes, what are you sacrificing?
Right.
And how are you using that? He, of course, references a really beautiful piece around Abe Lincoln and how when his mother was dying, she, at her deathbed, said to her children, be good to one another. And she expressed the hope that they live as she had taught them, loving their kindred and worshiping God. And though Abe was quite young at her passing, he never forgot his mother. She taught him a lesson that he carried with him through life, which goes on to say, she taught him that the beginning of wisdom is not imposed by discipline, but the beginning of wisdom is first the desire for discipline, the love of it, the voluntary choice of it. Thus, he learned that discipline is the high road that leads to everything that makes life worth living. And this is true. I mean, Raymond references it in the book, and we know it from our days in music. We know it from building businesses, from having a yoga studio. If you want to cultivate something of excellence, you're going to need discipline.
Absolutely.
If you want to direct your energy, your mind energy, your heart energy, your entire energy towards something that is greater than you, you require discipline. It is not a dirty word.
Not in the least. Yeah. Well, the word decision, right? It means to cut off.
Right.
Right. You make a decision about something. You choose one path. That means that you didn't choose the other. You remove that as part of the journey.
Right.
So, because you're taking the right fork instead of the left one. Nothing right or wrong about it, but there's a decision that gets made, and the decision itself is you're sacrificing left for right, right? Simply because. And we have to do this at any moment of every day. To me, the real essence of understanding this law is in understanding the everyday decisions that we make and what it is that we're trading our lives for.
Yes. That's a great way to put it. And I think this law of sacrifice is really tied into the use of the intellect.
Absolutely.
Because in this chapter, Holliwell says, we are not an undisciplined generation in any realm except one, and that is in our morals. So he's starting to put a smack down here, everyone. This is 1964. In science and art and athletics and any practical endeavor, we know the worth of discipline. This is true.
That's absolutely.
So if your kids are playing ball, you know that they got to practice. If you're a musician, you know you got to practice. It becomes like, oh, yeah. That's your discipline. You're sacrificing time to be better at something. Then he goes on to say, yet we let ourselves go. We must have our fling. We unleash our instincts and we throw off restraint. It is the denial of discipline that characterizes much of our moral life. Men everywhere are awakening to the necessity of disciplining their thoughts and acts. We talk about this all the time. And he says, when it comes to ourselves, the most valued of all, we let our thoughts run wild. No one can attain his ambitions until he learns to discipline his mental force and is able to control his thinking. Now, I love this because I love talking about thinking and thoughts, and mind is in every cell of our being, and our mind is a force of power. So if we are not able to discipline the direction of our mind, we've got energy going everywhere. And he goes on to say, no one can gain wisdom and understanding of life except that he seeks it in God's appointed way according to the law. Pretty
That's
incredible,
so
right?
Yeah. Yeah. The massive impact of disciplined versus undisciplined thought.
Right.
That's something that he highlights so beautifully in this chapter that I think is so important. When I look at it, I often look at things from this energetic perspective and the impact of the energy. And last week, in the law of increase, we talked about the, maybe condemnation or criticizing thoughts or lack things and how that contracts the energy. It makes your whole world smaller effectively. Right. And when you're undisciplined in your thoughts, so, you think positive for a moment and you're expansive for a moment and then you're right into the other. And it's like this constant back and forth, which is truly exhausting, both for your physical body and for your mind.
Right. Exactly.
And it's a result of, exactly as he's saying here, undisciplined thought.
Right. He makes a very bold statement here. You already said it, Nick, but something always has to be sacrificed for something else.
Yeah.
He puts that in capital letters. Everything in life has its own price and is ever up for sale. We have to purchase it at the price it demands. Day after day, we go up to life's counter and say, I will give you this if you will give me that. This bartering has another more familiar, perhaps. We call it sacrifice. Sacrifice, then, is not what our preachers have made it out to be. It is an inescapable necessity. It is a definite law that we must obey. We are sacrificing every day of our lives, whether we want to or not, whether we know it or not. No matter what we want of life, we have to give up something in order to get it. And I think when we look back, and all I think that each of us has to do is get to something that's really important to you, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a craft, whether it's a relationship, your job, whatever. Really hone in on that, and you will find with so much gratitude, actually, where you have sacrificed to become better at this. And there's joy in that, right? So if you love playing basketball and you go out and you work out and you play basketball, you're sacrificing time and energy to be a better basketball player. And you're probably loving it because the ideal of being a great ball player is compelling to you. But somewhere we've taken on this negative connotation of sacrifice. Yeah. And I think that can really it can create confusion. And then it can also kind of bleed into the role of discipline in our lives. Yeah.
Well, we rebel against it.
Right.
People will rebel against this idea of sacrifice and discipline with good reason when there's a misunderstanding around it.
Right.
Because, when you go down that track in the traditional way, like the way that most people understand discipline and most people understand sacrifice, it's Sucksville. Like, who wants to live your life like that, cold and mechanical?
Right.
And constantly just, giving up all the things that you love so that you can do the things that you have to do. And like, that is no way to live.
No.
And that is absolutely not what he is talking about here. And any of the spiritual teachings, Swamiji talks about this too, living in a cold and mechanical way. He's like, that is not how life is meant to be lived. It's a creative expression.
Yes.
Yet we require discipline in order to continue to grow and expand, to create prosperity in our lives, and to really, truly make the world as we would wish it to be in a beautiful way.
Yeah. It start with discipline of your thoughts, start with that acute awareness of what you speak, what you say, your actions, all those things. That is, a way of sacrificing lower so you can raise to the higher.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to touch on that.
Yeah, go for it.
A little bit more, actually, with that lower for the higher.
Yeah. Super important.
Yeah. It's like, think about it both ways. You can't reach for the higher if you won't let go of the lower.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that is the sacrifice.
Letting go of the lower.
Right. Now, what is the example he uses in there? He like loose living. He says you can't have a beautiful
You can't have
home.
Respect of your friends.
Yeah.
You can't have a beautiful family unit. You probably can't even pay your rent or mortgage if you're loose living, if you're throwing yourself all over the place.
Right. Your energy's going everywhere, and you're not honoring. Like, you can't have some people can if they choose that, but by and large, you can't have a really healthy, great relationship if you're lying to your partner and going out and cheating.
Right.
That will destroy your home and your life and your relationship. You actually don't get to have both.
Right.
Right. So if you don't let go of the lower, you can't have the higher. That's where you said so beautifully, you have to decide. What is more important to me? What do I actually want here?
Yeah. What's more important, chocolate cake or my health?
Right.
What's more important, smoking or my health? You do decide.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll get into this in other podcasts. There is that sort of reptilian brain that comes in and nudges us and urges us to like lean back, do the thing we always do. Don't give up the bad stuff. Stay there. That's when your choice takes over. That's where I like to say, source power is infinite, willpower is finite. So once we understand the formula and what's happening and how we do need to sacrifice lower things to bring in higher ways of being, doing, and having, it becomes very clear, and it's an easier choice to make. It's more compelling.
Yeah. And I think it's just a question that doesn't get asked a lot throughout, the typical day.
Right.
Do I want this or do I want that? Like, is the action that I'm taking right now really aligned with what I say that I want? Right?
And it can get, in the spiritual community, some of the teachings we just like, oh, you have to give up everything and live in a cave in order to be spiritual, in order to have God's voice in your ear. This is not true. The renunciation is understanding the value of everything, of owning what you own, not allowing it to own you, to not being attached.
Right.
So kind of a subsidiary law would be the law of detachment. Don't be attached to what you have.
Right.
Right. That creates a whole nother presence that will get sticky. So I think it's, that whole thing of giving up everything to have the highest enlightenment has nothing to do with that. It's your attitude towards it.
Right. And your attitude, that's the key part, right? Like, how do you think about it? It's not about, it has nothing to do with having or not having. That's the part that's confusing for people.
Right.
It's not about having a great income or living in poverty. It's not about having either one of those things. It's about your attitude and attachment to it.
Yeah.
And what it is that is truly of value. He gave a great example in there about Judas.
Well, let me get to that.
Oh, am I skipping ahead?
Yeah, I'm going to start right now.
Okay.
It's so this gets a little bit slightly queasy, everyone, but it's so beautiful. And when I read it first, I was like, oh my gosh, did anybody ever think of this in this way? Because we're so programmed to go straight to what Jesus sacrificed, what the Holy One sacrificed. Like, we go straight there, but listen to this. Just stay with me here. When this law of sacrifice is carried over into the moral realm, it is commonly presented one-sided. We are taught that if we want to live a good life, we have to give up so many pleasures. How familiar that sounds to some of us. The result is that we rebel. And when we think of sacrifice, we think of the ones who have had to give up so much pleasure for goodness? Who are some of the great sacrificers in history? Well, there was Socrates who drank hemlock. There was Jesus who was crucified on the cross. There was Paul who was beheaded. And there was Peter who was crucified upside down. But think for a moment, are they the ones who made the most terrific sacrifices? Now, I was reading this and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like, it sounds really horrible to be crucified upside down. I had no idea that happened to Peter. But anyways, he goes on to say, we speak of the supreme sacrifice of Jesus upon the cross. We read of the martyrdom of Saints Peter, Paul, and John. But what about Judas Iscariot? Think of what he had a chance to become. Think of the companionship he once possessed and the place he might have occupied. Think of what he threw away. Think of what he got for it. I say to you, the cross was not a sacrifice to be compared with what Judas paid. For but 30 pieces of silver and utter disgrace, he cast aside the richest opportunity of any man in all history. That just kind of blew my mind.
It's a gut punch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Swamiji shares the beautiful idea of that in another parable, where the king meets the sage and he's like, I can't believe, you're the king saying to the sage, you're such a great man for giving up all of the world. And the sage is like, I'm not great at all. Like, you've given up the self. Your true realization. In order to have that, I've just given up these things.
Right. That's another gut punch.
Right.
Like,
it is.
oh my
but
gosh.
That's such a beautiful story. And that's when I say, like, you're sacrificing your life for whatever it is that you're choosing in the moment. I mean that, like, in that way. I'm not saying like you have to, live every moment with that kind of gravity,
right.
But man, when you're making decisions in the moment about how you're choosing to spend your time,
right.
your effort, and your energy, it really should, it's proper to ask that question. What are we actually giving up?
Right.
Yeah.
And, like you said, in the day-to-day, it's like, you can go to, well, how's it that I want to feel? How do I want to show up? What do I want to receive? And then it's easier to look at, okay, I'm willing to give up my time and energy here, and I'm not willing to give up my time and energy on my phone for 4 hours looking at Instagram, kind of thing.
Right.
Get really clear.
Yeah. And then that's laziness. How did he put it in the other one? It was careless with the law.
Careless with the law.
Yeah.
Guys, don't be careless with the law. Oh my gosh. I love when he talks about freedom is not living an obsessed, undisciplined life. Freedom is being able to control your life and in making it what you want it to be. And his next capital statement is, in caps, an undisciplined life is an insane life.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. The idea that we just kind of need to get over ourselves, that it's when we look at those things we want to have, those experiences we want to create, all for the greater good. Why wouldn't we give up time? Why wouldn't we give up energy? Why wouldn't we invest money in it? And as long as the direction of our heart is going towards that upward spiral for the greater good, then we have confidence in how we invest towards that. It's when we lose the discipline of the mental thought flow and we're going sideways. And that's when I think people get into chaos and confusion because they're not sure what they're really wanting to pull in.
Right.
And so the idea of sacrificing anything becomes repulsive because they don't have the ideal.
Right.
And so always get back to the ideal. Always get back to that result that is more compelling than your current life. You'll be so happy to sacrifice discipline, time, energy, money to attain that.
Right. And, it's something I think that's important too. When people look at expanding their career or their business, oftentimes it gets into the mindset of like, well, in order for me to earn that income, I'm going to have to do this and this and this. I'm going to have to like 10x my activity, and I'm already maxed out as it is. So that'll probably kill me. Right. And that's probably true, actually, if you continue in the way that you've been doing it, but it's not really giving. Part of the sacrifice is the way you've been doing things, to recognize that what you did to get you where you are isn't necessarily what's going to take you to where you want to go.
Exactly.
Right. And sacrificing the way of doing things. I don't know. I know that you see this a lot in your own coaching.
Absolutely. We've got to change how we're thinking. We've got to change our beliefs, and moving out of the limiting belief and into you're connected to source. I mean, that's why we have these laws, right? You are connected to source. You have access to all that is. And it's way easier to get access when you're working with the laws.
Right. Yeah.
God, universe, source, spirit.
You might say it's the only way to get real access.
I would believe it's the only way.
Man, I could go on and on about this idea of freedom, not living an obsessed and undisciplined life. That's the idea. I just want to do whatever I want, whenever I want, and that's freedom, right? But it's not. It's not.
It will not bring freedom. At some point, I think it can disguise itself as freedom, because all of a sudden you're just like, yeah, I'm eating pints of ice cream and doing whatever I want, until your freedom is disrupted because your body shut down.
Yeah.
Until you lose your job because you didn't show up, until, you've drank so much that your relationship is broken. So we have to really be cautious of what you're disguising freedom as.
Right. That's such a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. What you're disguising freedom as. You have to sacrifice undisciplined eating in order to have great health. I'm not saying you have to sacrifice all chocolate cake forever.
No, we're not. We would never say that on this podcast ever.
We're not saying that. But what we are saying is if you eat chocolate cake 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night,
right,
you're probably going to be sacrificing your health for chocolate cake.
Right. And then no more anything, guys, nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So do you have an illuminated thought for today?
Well, the illuminated thought actually comes from this chapter at the end. He includes at the end of some of these chapters, not all of them, but he includes certain poems and thoughts that kind of encapsulate this. And I just love this one. The poem is called Invictus by W.E. Henley. And so here is the poem, everybody. This is the illuminated insight. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet this menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Ooh, that's good.
That's it. There's really
nothing else to say, everyone.
After that,
we're done.
Namaste.
Peace. Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.